It's a short talk where peace begins. We talk life, love, and what's within. Movies, healing, self-care flow. Real talk, safe space, let it grow. It's a short talk where hearts unwind. Sip your peace, speak your mind. It's a short talk, feel the vibe. It's your moment, come alive.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Easter Short Talk, your podcast for all things self-care and movies. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We're glad to have you. If you are watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe, and leave a comment below. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to follow and subscribe there and leave a comment or a review. It helps us tremendously. This is episode class of 85. I'm Jay Watson.
And I'm Cathy Castle, class 85.
Cathy's been waiting for this exact podcast.
Yeah, like the whole
episode
podcast.
That's the other reason she started. She's like, we got to make the 85 episodes. We can
All
quit
right.
after that.
I have to put a shameless plug in that the class of 1985 Easton High School is having their 40th year class reunion on November the 8th. If you're interested in going, you haven't already contacted me, let me know. I have about 65-ish people signed up so far, and I'm pretty excited. People seem very excited. 85.
So what we want to do this week is talk about the difference between ask ourselves a question. And I posted this online the other day to kind of introduce folks to what this episode was going to be about. And there's two questions. Well, three questions. First question is, are you happy? The second question is, are you fulfilled? Third question is there a difference? And the answer to the third question is there's absolutely a big difference between happiness and fulfillment. And we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Break it down.
And kind of get into kind of ways to move towards both, what they mean, why we sometimes don't achieve either or. So we're going to get into the minute. But instead of doing a regular check-in, I want to talk about real quick, Cathy, a quote on someone's Instagram post. They quoted their therapist. They had just come back from therapy, and they quoted their therapist, and their therapist said this: "It's not those who need therapy that come to us; it's their victims."
Wait, let's think about that for a minute.
And I'm like,
What? Say this again.
Well, at first glance, you're like, oh, yes, that's true. However, both are true because a lot of times the victims become the unhealthy part and they are going to therapy. And it also made me think of this in my personal case. And I've talked about, forgiveness and letting go of anger and grace. And it got me thinking about how, those who abused me and my parents who were not there for me in a parental way were that way because of things that they were dealing with that they may not have known at the time. So they were not going to therapy, but yet me as the victim at the time did, certainly later on when I got older. However, there are folks who sometimes through no fault of their own, and I was one of these people where I was doing a disservice to the relationships that I was getting into without any bad intention. I didn't know what I didn't know. However, I was bringing the unhealthy to them. Now, I don't know if any of them ended up going to therapy, or not, or whether they went because of I don't know. It's none of my business. But my point is, when I first read that quote, I'm like, I relate to it so much. But then as I unwrap the entire quote, I'm like, wait a minute, you can have been an unhealthy participant in a relationship and still have gone to therapy at some point, because I was that, and I'm sure there are others. But oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, it's the trickle down effect. They say, crap runs downhill. It's the people at the bottom of the hill that get all the crap, and they end up going to therapy for years and years and years because of actions of others that were done upon them for whatever reason. So I just thought that was a really interesting quote that, It's those that people that need therapy don't come to us, their victims do. Oftentimes that's probably true, but I mean, it's not a hard fact that that's the way it always is. But um, oftentimes if a trauma has been brought upon you by the acts of a person, yes, you have to sometimes go to therapy to kind of unravel what someone else did to you, whatever the case may be. So in that regard, yes, it's an accurate quote. But yeah, I just thought that was very interesting. And it's as the week went on, and I thought more and more about it, I started unwrapping the different layers to that quote. It wasn't just so black and white as what the written quote on the page that I was reading was when I first read it. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But that kind of, sort of, in a way, kind of leads us into this week. And initially I thought I wanted to talk about. I had read. I was taking a book out of Cathy Castle's, a page out of Cathy Castle's book, and I was reading an article online, and they were talking about how they had done a questionnaire, one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast, and they gathered all the information. You told them your age, your race, how many, your family situation, where you live, kind of work you did, and then they asked you, "Are you legitimately happy?" And in the first round of that questionnaire, depending on the East Coast and West Coast were slightly different, but they were pretty close. Between 40 and 45%, depending on which one you looked at, said that they were legitimately happy. Well, then part two of this questionnaire was they sent out one question, completely anonymous, and they said, please tell us if you lied on the initial questionnaire when we asked you if you were legitimately happy. And 30% of people said that they lied on the initial questionnaire. Now, they did say that a few of those folks were going through some stuff at the time of the questionnaire and were like so frustrated they said, no, I'm not happy. But, upon reflection, in a big general sense, their life on the whole was happy. So, but most of the ones who lied didn't want anyone to know that they were unhappy. So they just said, yes, I'm happy. And I found that very interesting. So then I got to thinking about, well, what is happiness? And then I started thinking about kind of words that sometimes we interchange together that don't necessarily mean the same thing. And happiness and fulfillment kind of, are kind of thrown around sometimes together. Sometimes, you know, folks think that they're kind of one and the same, when in fact they are kind of opposites. Um, they're completely different meanings. I know, Kathy, you've done some reading and some research, but from what I read the definition. I didn't read any articles, but I read the definition that I read said that happiness is more short term, external accomplishment, mostly accomplishment based feeling in a short period of time for a day or a week or whatever. And that kind of fades over time. Whereas fulfillment is an internal, self positive mindset where it's long term. It tends to be more stable over long periods of time. Doesn't mean it can't waver, but it just, and it got me thinking. I'd always known that happiness and fulfillment didn't necessarily mean the same exact things, but I did not know how different they were. And it got me thinking, because I tell people all the time, this is the happiest I've ever been in my life. And that, by definition, that's the wrong terminology for me to use. I should use, this is the most fulfilled I've ever been in my life, because it's been over a 5 year period of time now. Not that there aren't bad times and bad moments and bad days here and there, like we all have, but big picture, extended period of time, it's more fulfillment than it. I have happy days and happy moments and accomplishments that make me happy. And if it's a nice sunny day, I'm happy when I get up in the morning, things like that. But like we talked about before we popped on, they're short term. So I'm going to start rephrasing my terminology when I tell people, yes, I went through X, Y, and Z, but I'm now at the most fulfilled I've ever been. Instead of saying I'm the happiest I've ever been, because by definition, that's not the correct word to use for me, for my situation. And I'll let you get into some more the clinical article driven facts about happiness versus fulfillment.
Research. Well, I always love it, Jay, when you come up with our topics, and then I have to go chase what it is. You make me have to read up. This is. I'm glad we're talking about this. This is a fun thing to talk about because I'll be honest, I haven't done a deep dive like I usually do. This is a more quicker dive this week because that's where time has me. But you're absolutely right. But I think it's okay. I think it's okay for you to say you're happy. I think it's okay to still use that because it's a universal language. People understand happy, sad, right? I don't think it's wrong. But people, I would say, that are have done more self reflection, are aware of their own, I'm going to use the term emotional intelligence, which means kind of in tune with your moods and knowing how to get to neutral. Jay likes that term and I love it now. So people that have done a little more self exploration probably understand what fulfillment is, but just general public is probably not going to be like, oh, I feel fulfilled, or they're gonna understand that term happiness more. But I think it is important to break it down. I'm glad that you've brought this to my attention because it is a difference. And that they're in the same ballpark, but it's a different ball game. And like you're saying, is exactly what I've read. Happiness refers to a state of emotional well being characterized by positive feelings, contentment, joy, not negative, absence of negative, happy, joy. Don't we all want to be happy? I want to be happy. It's temporary, it's fleeting. That's where we get in trouble. It's, you've already said, derived from external factors, absence of negative feelings, and centered around not the president. It's centered around the present moment and immediate gratification. So those all sound great, awesome. I want them right now. I want them in a jar.
Those are
But
the feelings we get from, or those are the feelings we should get from a lot of the self care we do. So,
it's the feeling I get when I go to the mall and I buy a brand new outfit. I'm going to be honest with you. It might be how you feel when you've gotten a new car for maybe 3 weeks.
yeah,
Maybe,
mindset shifters. Yep.
right? You can think of those happy things. And then the more I was reading about this, the more I was thinking about people in my own life that I know that chase that happiness. They chase it and they're in trouble because it doesn't last. It might
It's
be,
like a drug. It's like a quick fix, and then it goes away. Yeah.
it's like I am darn happy when I'm on vacation. When I come back, that reality smacks you in the face. So what am I going to do to keep that mindset or that shift of how I felt when I was on that cruise or on that camping trip for me personally? How do I apply that to my everyday life in some ways? And that's where fulfillment comes in, right? So fulfillment goes beyond that momentary happiness, and it's a deeper sense of purpose and satisfaction in your life. Where you're kind of aligning your values, your
Yes.
goals, your passions.
Like Marty says, you're living more of the truth of what your values are. Yes.
It's more sustainable, it's longer lasting. So shoot, man, wouldn't you want something that's last longer, that I'm in the mall and I bought that outfit and I wore it and now I'm not as happy about it? It's driven, and this is where the hard work comes in. It's driven from personal growth, self-actualization, sense of purpose. That is hard work. Just being happy is not hard work, but being
Yeah.
fulfilled, you have to do
Yes.
more
Yep.
work, right? And here I thought this was interesting. I may not have said this. Fulfillment includes not only, it's a broader range. It's not just positive, but it also is negative emotions. So I might not have said that if I didn't read that, but it makes sense if you think about it because you're going to grow from negative things that happen to you, from your struggles, right? As you have shared with us about your life. Yeah. So I'll leave it there. I'll park it there for a minute.
I thought it was interesting, Kathy, when I was trying to narrow down what the topic was going to be this week, and I had read that study initially, and as I then kind of slightly shifted to happiness versus fulfillment, I don't know if it was the study's intention to draw attention to the fact that they used the term happiness but they specifically said, "Are you legitimately happy in your life?" But you know what we're saying, if we're going by the true definition of the word happy, but like you said, people tend to, and I think there is absolutely value in, you set a goal, whatever it is, whether it's a career goal, a personal goal, whatever it is, you accomplish that goal, you have a whether it's for a day or a week or a month, you have a time where you're happy and proud about that. That we should do those things. We're not saying avoid the short term happy stuff, do those. But at the same time, here's what I think. I think at least my opinion is, if we're doing enough of those short term happiness things, the cumulative effect now feeds into the fulfillment part of the positivity well of us. If we accumulate enough of those in the smaller short term individual things, I'll just call them accomplishments, whatever they are. Well, now we feel generally, it's like going to the gym. If you go to the gym long enough and you go consistently enough, you're just going to start, not only are you going to be in better physical shape, you're just going to start generally feeling better about yourself overall.
Well, then that gets into some biological stuff.
Yes, there's
But
probably some.
I'll challenge you on one thing, and I'm looking at some research. So I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. But this research says if you trying too hard to find happiness often has the opposite effect and can lead us to be overly selfish.
But to me, self care is not okay. I'm going to shooting for happiness, serving yourself. You're working on yourself, and the end result happens to be that you go to a yoga session, and right afterwards you feel good for an hour or two, whatever. Although, like for example, the movies for me are different because I specifically go there to intentionally shift my mind to a better place. You know what
Well,
I
and
mean?
you're using some healthy things. I think people chase. I mean, money is the best thing I know how to say.
Substances, yes,
So
whatever.
yes,
Yep.
substances. If
Food,
And
alcohol.
I've seen people chase these kind of happiness things, and they're miserable people. They're miserable.
Yep.
I know people that are chasing happiness. They're happiness in the moment. I see them happy in that moment. Then they're miserable. Like another statistic is about money. If you asked any of my kids right now, would you be happier if you're making $75,000 a year, or you made the salary of a professional baseball player? I'm pretty sure they're going to say, I'm going to be happy if I'm making the salary of the professional baseball player. So, but the statistics say money only buys you happiness up to that $75,000. I don't know where they come up with this number. And then after that, no significant effect on your emotional. My guess with that is big money, bigger problems kind of thing, you know?
Well, and plus we hear of pro athletes signing new contracts, and we're like, well, what's the difference between 30 million and 31 million a year? You know what I mean? At that point, now their grandchildren's grandchildren might benefit from that extra little bit of money down the road, but yeah, I think there are an awful lot of people, Kathy, that use, they like you said, they chase those short term things. Then they wake up the next day and start the whole cycle all over again. They might
Yeah.
be the same things, they might be different things, but they're and I guess they can trick themselves if they do it enough throughout the day and get through that day and then do the same thing the next day and so on and so on.
Or if you give yourself an and or, I'm only happy if
Yes, fill in
I'm
the blank. Yep.
whatever it is. I'm at the barn around my horses, at the gym, I'm with my kids, I'm on vacation, whatever it is. We have to be careful of those.
We should never say I'm only happy in that one place. Even if we consider, you know, like Leah talked about, the horse barn is like her thing. And it can be your biggest form of self care, but that should nothing for any of us. We should not be dependent on one single thing to feel happy or to feel fulfilled.
Even wonder, Jay, I'm just talking out of my head right now, but even if we did a little work and thought, okay, if I am happy doing any of those things, fill in the blank. What makes me happy? Like I gave the example of getting a new outfit at the mall. What makes me happy about that at the moment? I don't know. It's I feel like I might. It's I got a new pair of jeans, a new shirt for the season. It's something new. I haven't had that on before. I feel like it makes me look thinner. Whatever are my excuses. So how can I get that feeling in another environment, doing something else? You know, or
That's the tricky thing, Kathy, because you talked earlier about brand new car and having like
yeah,
you have that feeling for 3 weeks, and then you're like, "And look, I'm the same way." Like when you get a brand new car, you want
like
to
the
drive everywhere.
smell. I like how it drives. I think I'm cool. Got the
Yep.
radio bumping, and then you're like, before you know it, you have dirt on the floor. You've spilled something in
You've
there.
driven out, you got 25,000 miles in 3 weeks.
You've brought the subs in the car. I have a 30-day rule or 90-day rule. I don't remember what it is. It's been a minute since I got a new car. But I wouldn't let people bring food in my car, like fast food. Like I don't want that onion smell in my car.
We can't go buy a new car every 3 weeks. I can't
If you could
anyway.
lease it and you could be happy every 2 years.
My point is, you know, there's there's nothing wrong with these things in and of themselves. It's the why. If we are hanging our hopes and dreams of being happy on these short, fleeting things, they all fade out after a while. But then it's like, and look, I didn't know what the difference between the two words were. I knew they were different, but I didn't know specifically what the two different definitions were. I will say that now that I know what fulfillment is, like
So
I said, and maybe I'll use both when I describe, my.
I will tell you this in the same really good article. There is 3 factors, and then there's subcategories of that affect that influence our happiness and mood. And we're kind of talking around them right now, but they are biological, social, and cognitive influences. So you've really started to address right out of the gate the biological influences because you talked about you going to the gym. I mean, if I'm getting a dopamine hit because I bought a new outfit, that has changed my brain chemistry. That or I'm sniffing my new car smell. That's a neurotransmitter that's getting an increase because of whatever that is, whatever X, Y, or Z is, and it's biological. So what other things do we do to get that same hit? Rather it's going to the gym and engaging in that physical activity, doing some self-care things like deep breathing or meditation. What are the other things that can replicate those increases in our biological processes that are happening?
I think, Kathy, now that we've kind of brought this up, I think it's important for all of us to be aware of the difference between happiness and fulfillment and know kind of really know where, just so far happiness can take us.
What's like Pavlov, right? Or whatever example you want to use, the mouse and the
Yeah.
or you put a cookie in front of my face, I'm gonna pick it up a minute. I'm gonna be happy probably.
Maybe that explains why so many folks on that study said that they weren't happy. It's because really, by definition, they don't feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
In the big picture, in the big picture of long term of their life. So,
And
and my one of my things I wanted to talk about was why we don't
feel fulfilled.
go after one or the other. And I think not knowing the difference between the two is probably the biggest reason why folks lose out on the fulfillment end because they think these short term things of happiness are it.
We're
They
hijacked by them.
they certainly serve a purpose. They're not, again, they're in and of themselves. They're not bad. They're just. It's like eating a teaspoon of sugar. That sugar rush or a candy bar, that energy boost is going to go away after an hour or two.
But don't you think that in the society that we're in right now, that is very immediate, very quick reward based, I feel bad for all of us because we've all got hijacked by this quick. Let me be happy real quick. I want to be
Yeah,
happy. I don't want to be miserable. And what can I quickly do to get that
it's
content?
harder to be fulfilled nowadays than it's ever
It's
been.
harder. It takes a lot of work.
Yes, because
So
we're like you said, we're all about the moment with the phone in our hand in that very moment. And if we have enough moments throughout the day, we're good. We go on to the next day, and now there's a bunch more moments. But that's not fulfillment. It's just not. That's not an internal alignment with living with our true values. That's not about that at all.
the that's where these other 2 factors come into place. And we talked about biologically what happens, right? Your genetics have an influence, although the other research I read was genetics don't have that big of an influence. I mean, we can all say, boy, they got a crabby mother, no wonder they're grouchy or whatever. There's some genetics play in there, but not as much as we think. But it's the brain chemistry, what's regulating our moods, which is what's happening to change our brain chemistry, what's happening in our physical health through exercise and movement that's changing our brain chemistry. So there's that biological stuff. And we need to do those things, right? We need to, it doesn't always come in a pill. We don't need everything to come in a pill in this society. We need to boost our mood in natural ways. I really believe that. But it's also the social and cognitive influences. So, and those are, if you talk about, let me go to cognitive first. If you go to cognitive, this is work from us. It's the self talk. What are we doing? What are we on positive or are we on negative? So I'm stupid. I'm ugly. I'm old. People have a high tendency for negative self talk. I mean, I have it all the time. I can get in my head just as good as anybody else. I just spoke and I sounded terrible. I did a training and I could have been better. We're always striving for that perfection. So, and that can change our fulfillment, right? We may not feel like we're doing a good job at work, or we may feel like we're not a good parent or not a good spouse, which gets into the social influences, which is relationships. So I'll stay out of that. But that self talk, the practicing gratitude and the mindfulness, those are the subsets under cognitive influence. Because we know for a fact practicing gratitude changes how we feel.
Yeah, those are things that kind of that push us more towards fulfillment. Our value. We talk about how fulfillment is kind of an alignment. We live our life in alignment with what our true sense of self and our values are. Well, you kind of have to figure out the things that matter to you, because they're going to be a little bit different for everybody. Everybody's values, we would like for them, at least morally, everybody's values to be the same. But just as far as
Yeah.
what how what kind of legacy you want to leave and what kind of person you want to be, and like having a strong sense of who you are, loving that person and valuing that is like to me, once you grasp that, those things where you're seeking accomplishment in the short term things, you're not always going to win at those things.
You do
So
need to
you're not
know.
going to always do the thing at work that you're trying to accomplish. You're not always going to lift the amount of weights at the gym that you want to lift. And you're not always going to be able to buy the outfit or buy a new car. Or you're not always going to be able to do those things regularly. But you can regularly work on yourself enough so that your sense of self and your values and the sense of who you are begin to align. And once that's there, that doesn't mean you have all the answers. It doesn't mean that nothing bad is going to happen. But that part is always there. It's
You're defining yourself.
yes, that part does not ever get defeated. As long as you're keep continue doing the things that got you there, it's always to maintain that sense of self and your core values. It's not going to go away. So everything seems to come back to like the very beginning days of Easter Shore Talk, when we talked about what's self care, what's the definition of self care, and what are some things we can do for self care, and what are the benefits of self care. Well, here you go. You get a study in front of you, and somebody says, "Are you legitimately happy?" If you've been doing your self care consistently and with intention for a while, you can confidently check off yes, whether you want to call it fulfillment, happiness, whatever. You can check that box. You don't have to lie like 30% of these folks did. That isn't that kind of like the goal, is to not have to worry about all the external stuff that kind of happiness is defined by, the external short-term positive things. Shouldn't we want it to be big long term and not little short term? I mean, it sounds pretty elementary to me, but again, just like I didn't know, folks don't know the difference between happiness and fulfillment. I didn't. I knew they were different, but I didn't know they were this different.
I think, you were talking a lot about values alignment. I think that if people really want to do some work, I think you can go online and Google a free values alignment quick test. I think it's worth to do that and reevaluate that, yearly or whatever your time frame is, because you need to know what is it, what drives your behavior, what do you like, what are you passionate about, how can you even work on yourself if you don't know what you're about. I mean, and you can sit there and guess. I know what my values are. They're whatever. They're family. They're this.
Morals and values are different.
Yeah.
They're two different things. But I think, Kathy, if you're, and we talk all the time about, when you're deciding what self care things to do, try different things. You might come across something you never thought you'd like that you really, really enjoy. That kind of puts all the pieces together, all these self care things that you try, and maybe you narrow it down to like your five go tos, and there's maybe a few others that you do. That kind of paints a large part of the picture of who you are. Those things that are like, some people just like to paint. Like it's just that's who they are. It's not what they do. Like they're painters, they're artists. They just have this natural ability to paint on a canvas. Like that those things like that construct what become your values of who you are to the core. And for that person that's a painter that's just gifted in that way, part of his core is being a painter. But not everybody's going to have that ability or passion towards whatever it is. But you've got to self-reflect. We talk about that all the time. You have to figure out who you are and now build upon that and create your value, your overall value, but your values and living the core of who you are and having that strong sense of self that,
So
hopefully we all are trying to get to.
the other piece we're missing, we talked about biological influence, talk about cognitive influences, your own self talk, your own gratitude, your own mindful techniques. But the other is social influences toward happiness and fulfillment, right? It's, healthy relationships. Gosh, people have all kinds of relationships out there and they hold on to some pretty tragic
Yeah.
ones. Or sometimes you have no choice.
And your
But
people, your good people,
find right? And your community, having a sense of community. Because we are, as much as people say, I'm not a social being, we're all social beings. That's just how we're put on this planet. We're social in some ways. So, how can you connect? And it may be different. Everybody's not the same in how they connect socially or or community. Doesn't mean you have to go sit in the middle of a crowd of people and speak. It may be very different with how you respond to community. But the relationship piece is a big part of you and how you're fulfilled. If you're holding on to negative stuff, toxic relationships, that's a tough one, right? Might not make you your best happy self or fulfilled self.
So let's touch on the fact that 30% of those people that answered that questionnaire initially lied.
It's
And I'm
interesting.
just like, oh.
Well,
I mean, I get it, but I don't get it. Uh,
you think that is more of a stigma thing? You think they did that because if I say
I just think
happy,
the
yeah,
whole social media world that we live in, I think drives that a lot. Because what do we do on what do most folks do on social media? They put their best foot forward. Everything they put is, hey, look how good my life is. Hey, look how good my life is. Hey, I'm happy. Look at me. When the fact is, most of those people aren't really happy. They're trying to convince you that they're happy because they want to be looked upon as being accepted or being or in a positive way. You know,
well, we're putting our happy moments on for the most part. We're not saying I lost my remote to the TV and I am furious.
right.
Who cares? Or
On social media, like the positively presented posts outweigh the negative ones probably 8 million to one. That's an exaggerated number, but because number one, nobody wants to be that vulnerable. Number two, nobody wants to be deemed as lesser. Nobody wants to be judged. So social media is all about that. So that's just an extension of that. When I'm asked this question on a piece of paper, my post on this piece of paper is going to be yes,
I'm good.
yeah,
But if you ask most people, they probably say it. How are you? I'm good.
yes.
Because you're not gonna go into I'm awful and you got an hour so I can unload and dump on you. I mean, which goes into relationships. If you have some healthy relationships and some places to dump your junk, then maybe you'd answer a question like that pretty much more reasonably.
I wish they would have, and maybe they did. I just didn't read it, or they didn't include it in the article. I wish they would have expanded the study and been like, how many of you like really on a consistent basis think about whether you're happy or not? Because there are just people that go through life kind of indifferent. They just kind of make their way through life, and they don't seem to like be, real happy or real sad. They just kind of are just here, and they're just people. There are people that don't like reflect on their life and like, how can my life be better? There's just people that don't do that for whatever reason. So I wish they would have expanded and been like, how many of you actually really consistently think about, if I'm pretty happy, what could I do to be more fulfilled? Or, and maybe they did, they just didn't include it in the article.
And
In other words, I don't think any of us should ever be satisfied. Be like, okay, I'm, I'm fulfilled. I'm done. My work is done. I've got nowhere else to go. Because it can always be better. It can always be worse. It can always be better.
right.
We should all, to the day we pass, should be learning. We should be wanting to learn. You know, Unfortunately, folks just kind of get up, get on social media, do the thing, rewind, do the same thing the next day, and and
Yeah.
then at 60 years old, they kind of scratch their head and they're like, "Man, something's missing," or what's going on?
I feel like that all of us, me too. I mean, I'm right here too. I mean, sometimes I can get into some pretty overwhelmed and energy. I told you we need to do a segment on energy management, manage our energies, because I can get pretty depleted. And when I'm depleted because I've overcommitted myself by either my own expectations or my inability to say no, then I have probably a less positive thinking mindset, and then I'm probably feeling less happy or fulfilled. I think they're all related. Like, talking about ways to feel that way, how to change it, and a lot of it's habitual stuff. It's like, where do we dump the negative stuff? Where do we, for one thing, yes, there's what do we do to take care of ourselves? And I was in a group today and people were like, I'm so sick of the self-care jargon. Everybody says it everywhere.
But they're not asking themselves, why do we have to keep talking about it? If everybody was doing it, we wouldn't have to talk about it.
Yeah, and it's like, but where do we put I'm thinking, where do we put the negative stuff? Because we all have it. Every day we feel negative about. I mean, there's stuff coming out of us. So where do we help put that in a healthy spot? Whether it's talking to somebody but not carrying that as a thread through your week and your days. How do you? We need to make the mind shifts.
If we're working on ourselves consistently and intentionally enough, the external things have less effect on us. They just do. Doesn't mean they don't bother us at all. I still yell at people in my car driving. People driving irritates the crap out of me. It just does. Probably always will.
You and
But
Marty both. Marty talks to people like they can hear him. Like
but
there's a
if
speaker.
like if you are living your life based on who you are, and you just know without a question of a doubt who you are and what your value is and what your values are, you're not going to be worried if 8,000 terms of self-care, and people, we have to keep talking about them because people aren't getting it. People aren't getting it, so we got to keep talking about it. We got to keep figuring out a way to do, as we were just talking a minute ago. And I know you and I have talked about, you would ask clients, what do you do for self care? And I said, Cathy, maybe we should be asking, what do you like to do?
Right.
So I'm going to take that a step further. And we should all be asking ourselves, who am I? Like, what defines Jay? What defines Cathy? And I'm not talking about, all right, Cathy is a great mom. She does a great job of running China Marker. And those things are true. Those are pieces of your definition, but that's not Cathy the individual. Those are roles that Cathy has, and they're very important roles, and Cathy's great at those roles, but
He asked.
like they should only be a piece of what defines Cathy. There should be like, how did I treat people in my life? To me, we all should have that as a number one. That should define all of us.
Yeah.
Yes, Jay can be a good salesman, and he did well with this, maybe not so well with this. How did he treat people? People will forget what you said to them. People
Yeah.
will forget what you did to them, but people will never forget how you made them feel, ever,
Right.
good or
They
bad.
don't care what you have. Nobody cares.
Yep.
that you have that really new car every.
So my question is, my challenge for everybody listening or watching is, ask yourself, what defines me? What creates my value, and what are my values? And am I living my life based upon that? Not so much about these short term things. And again, they're not accomplishments aren't bad, but if we're like Cathy and I've been talking about, they're short term. They only last for a little while. It's like eating a candy bar, and that energy, that sugar rush wears off after a little bit of time. You know, yes, do those things. Yes, do self care things. Yes, do the things that are the mindset shifters, going to the movies or pottery or yoga, whatever it is that gets your mind in a better place. Absolutely. That's a very big part of what self care does. How how do those accumulate to create the core of who you are, and are you living your life upon that and not so dependent on the external things that we don't really have a whole lot of control over?
You love that
Yes.
mindset shift, and I was laughing when I read it in here. So under improved mental health, there's emotional intelligence, which is developing emotional intelligence, which is recognizing and managing your own emotions, being kind of level with that, being self-aware, knowing your values, which is just what you talked about. And the other was mindset shift. And since that's your one of your faves, the definition of mindset shift is, by understanding the psychology behind happiness, which is what we're talking about, we learn to cultivate a positive mindset. This shift in thinking helps us focus on gratitude, resilience, and optimism, which are essential components for maintaining good mental health. So, wouldn't it be great to be resilient? I mean, I'm gonna knock you down, you're gonna get back up. Optimism, I'm hopeful, I'm excited about the future, and I'm grateful.
And why do we feel those things, Cathy? Because we've created a strong enough sense of self that, even if the bad happens, and it's going to happen to all of us, it just is, that doesn't define us. I just asked everyone to say, what defines you?
Right.
Well, what happens to us should not define any of us. Our traumas should not define us. Or, the accumulation of all these good things that we try to do in our lives should be what defines us. And now you're kind of on the right path to fulfillment. Yes, be happy in the moment, concert or, whatever. Do those things.
Take them, do
Absolutely.
'em.
That's self care. But I think you have to understand that that concert, that rush from the concert is only going to last you a little bit of time after the concert's over. Yes, you'll have good memories for a few days and you'll talk about it, but that fades. Should you still go to the concerts? Absolutely. Do
But
as
you're
many of
gonna
those
get
things.
smacked back into reality
Yep. Do as
by
many of
doing
those
it.
things as you possibly can. Absolutely. But just understand where their place is. It's not. It doesn't define us. It defined that. Like you went to country calling for what? 4 days, 3 days.
3 days, 4 days.
It was your it defined you for 3 days. That was it, and that's great. You had a wonderful time. We all
Yes,
should
it's a
want to do
good
the
time.
same,
I
but
wish
it
I could
didn't
keep
define
doing
your
it.
life. It
No.
did. Yeah, it didn't. Like when if someone were to do a biography of Cathy, like the lead story would not be she went to country calling for 3 days,
But it is a good memory to fall back on to make me smile.
but they might say Cathy did all these long lists of things for self care, and to make that the cumulative effect of all the things that builds your fulfillment, or helps to build your fulfillment.
Yeah. And what can you grab from those short things that you like,
Yes.
Can you listen to that kind of music in your earpods or on your car? Can you get with those friends that you got to? Can you plan another concert? Whatever you took from it, that I took from it.
Yeah. All right, Kat. Before we get out of here, let's shift over to trivia time.
Yeah.
Music and movie trivia.
All right.
So,
You
what's your
want me to go?
question this week?
All right. I mean, you teed me right up to mine, which is music trivia in the country genre.
Well, I'm going to not get this right.
You might. So on October 19th, just a couple days ago, right? Because what are we, 21st? On October 19th, three people got inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame this year. And I can tell, I'll give you the three categories that I became aware of. non-performer, the veteran era, and I'm in the modern era.
So they basically do it like the Baseball Hall of Fame does.
So I don't know if you'd attempt to guess
Yeah.
any of those three.
The only one, Kathy, I'm going to just say, gosh, the non-performer, I would have
I wouldn't
zero,
have known. I wouldn't have
less than zero idea about that.
I'll tell you what, the veteran, I'm going to give you a couple clues. I had no idea who the non performer was. The veteran person, I would have thought already would have been in. And maybe that's why they do that. And then the modern one, I really, and
So I'm only going to guess the modern one, and I'm just going to say Carrie Underwood. That's my only guess.
that isn't it. I wonder if she isn't it. She might already be in it. I have no
But
idea.
she's kind of pop, though, too, so who knows?
So, all right, you want me to tell you who these are?
Yep.
The modern one, by the way, was Kenny Chesney. I love
Okay.
Kenny Chesney. I love him. And Megan Maroney and Kelsey Ballerini were part of it and paid tribute to him because he's sang with both of those girls. And the veteran one was June Carter Cash. I would have thought she would have been already in, right? And then I didn't know the non-performer Tony Brown, although he has performed, but he was in for his production.
Yeah, he's a producer,
kind of thing.
songwriter, whatever. Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Once you said country, I knew I was going to fail that one.
Got you in trouble. I tripped you up.
So mine is movies, and my question is: in 2002, the Oscars introduced a new category for animated feature film. What was the first animated film to win an Oscar for animated feature film in 2002?
Toy Story?
No. That would have been I would not have gotten the question right either.
Cars.
No.
Monsters Incorporated. Wait, it's animated, like a cartoon. Maybe are those not considered?
It was the first year they started having a category for animated films. They've had it ever since. This was the one that won it the very first year they had the category.
Is it? Am I going to kick myself?
Shrek. Now, it's not the first animated movie to win an Oscar of any kind, because Pinocchio actually won an Oscar in Oscar.
Yeah.
But but yeah, Shrek was the first one when they introduced that category in 2002. It was the first one to win for animated feature film, its own category. So you can tell that's kind of about when
I love Shrek.
The animated movies started to really take off. They had to create a whole new category in the Oscars just for animated films, which makes sense. I'm kind of surprised that they don't really. They do separate for the Emmys as far as drama and comedy, but they don't do that for the Oscars. You just like win Best Picture or Best Actress or Supporting Actor, whatever. They don't separate into like drama, comedy, and act. They don't do that, but they do it for the Emmys.
Got you.
Which is interesting. So, what have you been watching lately?
I got nothing. Isn't that sad? Look, I was so excited. I don't know. One night this weekend, there was lots and lots and lots of. Right now in my living room, there are two TVs. There's the main big TV, and then there's a sub TV. So there is sports all over the place going on, and
so you kind of got picture in picture, but on a big scale.
For them to put a third one up where they launch a rocket or something. I don't know. So there's a lot going on, right? So I was like, I'm gonna take myself down. I have this room that you step down. I'm gonna go in that room. I'm gonna put my ear pods in for my Roku TV, and I'm gonna watch something for me. I was so excited. I had my blanket, I had popcorn, I had my hot tea. I was ready, Jay. And then I'm like, Marty, do you want to watch this? Yeah, I want to watch that. I was like, watching that. Marty, do you think you'll watch this? You know I want to watch that too. But you do what you want. I was like, kids, are we going to finish it? Yeah, we're going to finish it. I was like, just forget it. So then I was like, I'm going to go back to The Crown because I never finished The Crown. So I get going. I got it on. 5 minutes later, I'm sawing logs asleep. I never saw any of it. And Brandon was even like, Mom, I saw that you were trying to watch something and I went to say goodbye to you, but you were like, yeah. So anyway. It didn't happen.
They have a serious case. Right? They got a serious case of FOMO. If they can't They got to have two different things going on. Like, how can you have all your attention? How can you? There you go. There
I'm gonna
you
tell
go.
you what,
That's
it's a talented group of people. How they can watch, and one of them they got the red zone on, which is a lot of different ones in one screen. It's not even just one. So then they got the baseball in one. You got red zone that has multiple games. I don't know how they do it, but they are multitasking like champs and following each other's dialogue, and it scares me.
that's sad. That's actually sad. I think it's like, man,
There's some sports lovers. I'm not kidding. They got the
if
man
they're
cave up
like if
there.
they've got the red zone on, they're watching literally all the games that are playing at that time. They're Ravens fans, so I
They
can
had a
get like
bye this week.
I can see where like you've got your favorite team and you like you people sometimes you people even like tailgate at home and they do a cookout and they that's great that's fit and they have a family it's like a family event to watch the game but to like have that same like I've got to watch all the games all the teams right now in the same moment on the same picture oh my gosh
Yeah,
Woo,
there's some
man
there's some there's some sports fans
I'll
in my
tell you what, I mean, one of yours is married and the other one's not far from married. So maybe what do I know? But
it's at a sports game tonight. It's at the Caps game. These people love their sports.
I'm
And I don't know
thinking,
what's gonna
what are
happen.
these boys' wives going to be? I mean, what kind of woman is going to be okay with that? But apparently, two of them already have women that are okay with that.
Well, I guess they're worse habits. Anyway, what are
Yeah,
you
for sure. Yeah.
what are tell me what I know you're though being much better about this than you're watching.
Well, of course, I've been watching The Voice. It was on last night. It's so good. Man, it's so good. And I've been watching this
Keep
brand new
forgetting. So it's 2 nights it's still 2 nights?
Mondays and Tuesdays. Yep.
Mondays and Tuesdays, not Sundays and Mondays.
You could go on Peacock and catch up, watch the whole season back.
I know. I'm just not that good.
I started watching this brand new true crime series on Hulu called Toxic. And there's this woman who went through some domestic violence of her in
Is
her
it
own life.
true? It's a true one.
True stories. Yep. Each episode is a different story. She's like an investigative reporter now where she goes and interviews victims of domestic violence and all these things. Each episode is its own individual story. I don't know how many episodes are in the whole season. I've watched, I think, 4 or 5 episodes, and they're all true. And and normally I'll run across some stories that I've heard of before, but I hadn't heard of any of these. Just some and the one guy was a U.S. Marshal that was like the abuser, and he used his position and his ability, and he was trying to frame. Oh, it wasn't a love triangle. It was a love square. That was man. I'm like, no
Have
matter
you
how many, no matter how many times I watch these shows, Cathy, I'm just like,
Hey, have you seen that one? I almost watched it, but I would apparently fell asleep in 5 minutes. But the BLK, it was they keep introducing it. It's like a girl and her dad was like the serial killer. The BLK.
the BTK killer. Yeah, that was yeah.
Did you watch that?
But that's from a while ago. That's from years ago.
Uh-huh.
Like the story was years ago.
Like the guy's still alive, I guess, right? And she went and visited him in prison, and
I don't know. I don't really know a whole lot about the story.
it looked interesting. But I was like, man, I don't know if I'm feeling serial killer, so I didn't watch it.
And BTK stood for the letter stood for something. It was like
Yeah,
bind, tie, kill, or something about
yeah.
like his
With what he was
how
doing, I
like how
guess.
he went about. He was a serial killer. Yeah, but the letters meant something.
Yeah, sound like a banger of a dad.
I'm trying to think of. I have been watching the baseball playoffs a little bit, even though the Orioles aren't in it. And it's been like Toronto won last night, so that's kind of interesting. How Toronto, who's in the Orioles division, they're in the World Series against the Dodgers. That'll be the Dodgers. I
Mm,
mean, they got all the money. So
mm.
freaking Otani hits 3 home runs in the same game, pitches in that game, strikes out 10 guys. Probably the best postseason performance because nobody. Babe Ruth used to do it way back in the day, but nobody does that. Nobody pitches and hits now. They actually made a specific rule called the Otani rule where he can pitch, and then if he gets pulled out of the game as the pitcher, he can still stay in as the DH. That wasn't a rule before. So I'm
Really?
thinking,
I didn't know that.
here's the best team that has the best player, and they get a special rule so that the best player can be on the field more. I'm like, what in the world is Major League Baseball thinking of?
We're never going to beat the Dodgers.
No, heck no. We're never going to beat any of those big name teams consistently that have money. So next year, Cathy, here's what's interesting. Next year, they're going to have a way that you can, like in football, if you disagree with the call, you can throw the red flag and they'll look at a replay. Well, you'll have 2 times during the game with balls and strikes where you'll be able to dispute a ball or strike call 2 times a game, each team. They've been doing it in the minor leagues for a couple years, and
Oh, really? They
yeah,
tested it out there, huh?
it'll tell you whether the umpire. So
Well,
yeah,
because now they can. It's videoed, right?
yeah. Now they'll have the technology, kind of like how they have at Wimbledon, where they have what's called Cyclops. It's actually a robot that looks down the line and says whether the ball is in or out.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's called Cyclops, but it'll be similar to that, but they'll have it like framed for the strike zone, and they'll have Cyclops looking at it to see if it's ball or strike. And I would assume that this first year they're going to start with 2. You can do it 2 times each team. It'll grow because there's some crazy ones that are missed balls and strike calls. It's ridiculous. But anyway, we'll see what the Orioles do in the off season, whether they get any new players or what they got to do. So anyway, that's it. We hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Easter Shore Talk. We'll catch you next time. Take care, guys. Have a good one.